Greetings, my English 101 students. Welcome to my wonderful stage of empty bookshelves. So, I'm going to cover a little bit from the past 2 weeks of class. This first video, I'm going to be talking about finding your sources and pulling quotes from those sources and that process. And then in the second video, talking a little bit about perspectives. And so, with your current assignments, the big thing you want to bear in mind is that you are gathering together sources and quotes so that you have information to map out for your writing. And so the first thing we talked a bit about is last week we looked at an electric vehicle and what types of primary sources to use, where we would get that information, what we would do with it. And so what I recommend when you're finding sources is, first, whether you're using Google or Heartland Library, scan through those sources. Don't just pick the first one you see. Instead, try to find the ones that are the closest to your specific topic. Okay, remember from that CRAP test, the R for relevance is really important here. If you can find a very specific source, that is ideal. It's not always possible, but the more specific you get, the better. Next, once you have that source, what I recommend doing is, choosing 3 or 4 quotes from that source. Some sources it'll be more, some it'll be less. If you are quoting a tweet from Elon Musk, for example, the tweet itself would be the quote, end of story. There's not much else you can get out of it. On the other hand, if you have a 20-page scholarly source talking about the development of electric vehicle batteries, you're likely going to need several quotes, possibly even 10 or 12 quotes from that one source. So once you have a source, what I recommend doing is copy over the sentences that are relevant to your notes and then immediately put in your citation. All right, so if you have stuff that you're copying directly, put in quotation marks, and then make sure that you are adding that author's name in parentheses after it, and then also include a URL or the title of that source, or download a PDF of it if it's online, so that you can quickly access that source later when you are doing the actual writing. You're especially going to need that source when you put together your works cited page. For the articles you've been doing, a works cited page is required, but we haven't really been requiring the full-on MLA citation standards, but you do want to be mindful of them. You need to be able to find your sources later so that in case there are any questions about it, in case you need to redo your citation, you can find those. Also bear in mind that when you're citing a source, if I cannot find the source that you have cited, then it is basically a useless citation. All right, so you need to provide enough information that this source could be found either through the internet or the library or some other means. Now, once you have that list of quotes together, what I recommend doing is mapping out using like a bubble map or a skeleton map or an outline, map out where these quotes would go in relation to each other. And this is one of the reasons why every quote needs that citation with it. Because when you're doing your documents and you're doing your research, there's a good chance you're going to be moving your quotes around in the document. I will often have 2 documents that I work with at a time. I'll use one document that has my research notes and the other document that becomes the paper. And so what I will do is I will take my quote that is in quotation marks and has the citation, I will copy it over into my paper document, and then I will write my paragraphs around that quote. I will do my analysis with the quote directly in mind. This is also a good way to ensure that you don't accidentally commit plagiarism. All right, and this is one of the huge things here. You know, a paper that is poorly written is far, far better than a paper that is plagiarized. All right, I would rather see a paper that has mistakes than see a paper that is copying outside sources without citations. Now, one problem that I have noticed that many students run into is they will have their source and they'll have the document they're writing in, and then they'll be writing their paper while looking at the source. The problem that comes up here is that when you are doing that, it is very, very likely that you will end up unconsciously copying the things that you are seeing directly into your paper, because your brain is just going to take stuff in and send it right back out again without enough time to really think about it and digest it. This is one reason I strongly recommend the research notes approach. So, you know, take that source you're looking at, copy over those quotes with those citations right away, and then when you are at the stage of writing your paper, go ahead and close the document. Go ahead and close that source out. You should not need to be looking at it during your writing. Instead, just look at the research notes and then start writing your paper from those notes. If you're copying those quotes over directly with their citations already in place, and then you are writing your thoughts about those quotes, you know, plagiarism becomes very unlikely in this case, because you have the citation that shows where the quote came from, where the ideas came from, and instead of copying what's on that source, you're forcing your brain to kind of digest it and to write down what you remember from it. And what you'll notice is that it is much easier to do good analysis this way, because you're relying on your mind, your brain, to kind of come up with the recollections and to fill in the gaps that you yourself see in the sources. Okay. So the next thing we covered was how to find sources with Heartland Library. You know, a couple key things to bear in mind. All right, first, you want to use the Search Anything button. That is the most helpful research tool with Heartland Library's website. Next, there is the peer-reviewed checkbox. It's a good idea to hit that when you are looking for your scholarly sources. 99% of the time, any sources that come up when the peer-reviewed box is checked are going to count as scholarly sources for you. Right? It's also helpful to check the full text available. That box tends to be checked by default, and that way you can immediately download whatever sources show up. On the other hand, if Heartland Library does not have many sources showing up, you can uncheck that box, and then it will give you links to additional sources. Some of those will be locked behind paywalls, and if that's the case, go to the Heartland Librarians. They will acquire those sources for you. They will actually do the purchasing so that you don't have to. Now, a couple quick comparisons with the Heartland Library versus Google Scholar. So with Heartland Library, you can, when those boxes are checked, you can be rest assured that the sources you are finding are going to be scholarly peer-reviewed, and that you can immediately download the full text. On Google Scholar, some of the sources on there are not peer-reviewed. Right? Some of them are going to be excellent secondary sources. Some of them might be vanity journals where individuals have actually paid to get their articles published, and those are not the most reliable sources. On the other hand, the advantage that Google Scholar has is it will turn up far more search results than would be possible for Heartland Library. And so Heartland Library, you may not find any sources on your topic. Google Scholar you may have to go to Google Scholar. And so because of this, I recommend starting with Heartland Library, seeing what it has to offer first, because the sources you do find there will tend to be better sources. But if you don't find enough, definitely go to Google or Google Scholar. Find those sources you need. All right. So with that, Let me know of any questions. I'm going to switch gears in another video to talk about perspectives in your research.